Okay, I think we're spot on at 4:30. Well, some people are coming in, but we'll make a start. A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this session, which is, I think, on one of the most pressing challenges of our time. How we rebuild trust and reconnect our increasingly polarized societies. My name is Piotr Sadowski. I'm Secretary General of Orange Europe, Vice President of Lifelong Learning Platform. And while my work is deeply rooted in civil society, lifelong learning, and social justice, I must admit, in current times, I sometimes feel more like a social engineer, or maybe sometimes a part-time diplomat navigating the growing divides in our societies. Because let's be honest, if democracy were a perfectly balanced equation, we wouldn't need to be here. We wouldn't need to be debate this topic. We could be somewhere else talking about something much more comfortable. But that's not the world we live in. Instead, we are in a moment where polarization isn't just a political or media buzzword. It is shaping our lives, our elections, policies, and also the very fabric of our societies. Gloria Steinem once remarked, "The first resistance to social change is to say it's not necessary." It's true, change is not just necessary, it's absolutely urgent. And it begins with the way we listen, the way we engage and challenge one another. And this session is not just about diagnosing problems. It's about charting a course forward. How do we reweave the social fabric? How do we create conditions for dialogue that will move beyond shouting across divides and towards genuinely hearing one another? And crucially, how do we ensure that education, culture, civic engagement, and democratic participation don't just survive in this climate, but actually actively counteract the forces which are pulling this apart? So, to help us make sense of this, we are joined by someone whose perspective on society is shaped not just by policy, but by precision. Isabel Legalo Flores, Secretary General of the European Economic and Social Committee. Now, you may or may not know this, but Isabel is a scientist, a mathematician, someone who can see the world through the beauty of logic, number, and structures, which makes introducing her into this debate all the more fascinating. Because while democracy and society often feel like a very chaotic, unpredictable set of forces, they are also about balance. They're about patterns. They're about finding solutions that hold up even under the most difficult conditions. In mathematics, a system remains stable when all elements are accounted for, when not a single variable dominates to the point of collapse. The same really applies to democracy. When trust erodes, when voices are excluded, when fear distorts reality, the whole system is at risk. Thus today, the challenge before us is how to restore that balance. And who better to set the stage for this conversation than Isabel, who has dedicated her career to strengthening civil society, strengthening participation, and ensuring that no one is left out of Europe's democratic equation. Isabel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for these very sound and beautiful words connecting with this past of mathematics of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, dear members, it is a privilege to be here with you today for this essential discussion, you mentioned it, on reconnecting polarized European societies. So I want to extend first my warmest gratitude to the organizer for bringing us together and to our distinguished panelists for sharing their insights today with us. As Secretary General of the ESC, my work often revolves around ensuring that our institution functions effectively, supporting our members, our staff, and our broader mission. But at its core, this role is about fostering a strong and inclusive community. The ESC is a unique place where civil society actors, social partners, and experts come together to shape Europe's future. It is a place where diverse voices are not just heard, but valued and integrated into the fabric of decision-making. In many ways, this mirrors what we are discussing today, the need to create environments where dialogue flourishes, where inclusion is the norm, and where our differences strengthen rather than divide us. I'm grateful to be part of this conversation because I believe that at the heart of democracy, there is a fundamental truth. Societies thrive when everyone feels they belong. When we invest in diversity, in inclusion, in education, We do more than just build fairer institutions. We build resilient communities and stronger democracies. Diversity and inclusion are not just moral imperatives. They are essential foundations of our democratic societies. And truly inclusive societies foster innovation, they foster resilience, they foster social cohesion. And yet today, we are witnessing a troubling shift. Geopolitical tensions, economic disparities, and the rapid spread of misinformation are deepening societal divides. Rather than investing in diversity, some institutions and corporations are now retreating from it. Meta and Amazon, among others, have scaled back their diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments. Governments, too, are reversing progress. And we cannot afford complacency. The retrenchments of DEI initiatives risks undoing years, decades of progress toward fairer, more inclusive workplaces and societies. Across Europe, rising populism, social divisions, and misinformation threaten democratic stability. We see nationalist rhetoric gaining traction, anti-immigration sentiments fueling fear, and minority groups, migrants, ethnic communities, LGBTIQ communities, facing increasing discrimination and exclusion. The consequences are clear. A divided society struggles to solve collective challenges. We know that. Without inclusive dialogue, misunderstandings grow. Without representation, alienation deepens. And without equality, democracy weakens. Diversity and inclusion initiatives offer a crucial antidote. They create spaces for dialogue, cultivate mutual respect, and strengthen our collective civic identity. Inclusive workplaces, for example, allow people from different backgrounds to collaborate, to challenge biases, and build trust. And this is why the ESC takes this responsibility very seriously. Workplaces are more than just professional environments. They are microcosms of society. When inclusion is embedded in professional life, it has a ripple effect, fostering openness and understanding beyond office walls. At the ESC, we have made diversity and inclusion a strategic priority. This is not just a policy document, it is a daily practice and ongoing commitment. We have taken concrete steps, such as creating safe spaces for discussion on gender-related topics, the Women's Forum, and we aim to extend this approach to all communities seeking connection and support. The value of diversity is well documented. Research from McKinsey, for example, shows that companies, organizations with high ethnic and cultural diversity are 36% more likely to outperform on profitability. Gender diverse companies have a 25% higher likelihood of strong financial performance. But beyond the statistics, the true benefit is this: when people feel seen, heard, and valued, they contribute more fully, not just in their workplaces, but in society as a whole. And if we want to rebuild trust and cohesion, we must start with education. Knowledge empowers people to critically assess misinformation, challenge stereotypes, and embrace diversity. Yet, in the face of rising polarization, we see an erosion of democratic values and an increase in radicalization. This makes education, particularly media literacy and civic engagement, more important than ever. The ESC firmly advocates for inclusive education as a tool to counter hate speech, promote European values, and instill a culture of dialogue and respect. Schools, university, and lifelong learning programs play a vital role in equipping citizens with the skills to engage constructively with diverse perspectives. If we invest in media literacy, intercultural dialogue, and inclusive curriculums, we take a critical step toward bridging divides. The ESC stands firmly for gender equality, fair representation, and social inclusion. Through our other group on equality, the Women's Forum, and our broader advocacy, we work to ensure that diversity is reflected in decision-making at all levels. Beyond our institution, we actively support EU policies that combat discrimination and promote inclusive employment practices. But But this is not a task for institutions alone. Achieving meaningful change requires collaboration between civil society, businesses, policymakers, and educators. As a conclusion, at a time when polarization threatens our societies, diversity and inclusion are not just aspirations. They are the foundations of strong democracies. We must actively promote policies that break down barriers, uphold equity, and create a sense of belonging of all. All stakeholders, governments, businesses, civil society, and individuals should champion inclusivity by investing in education, lifelong learning, and fair opportunities. True progress starts with recognizing the dignity and rights of every individual. Let us stand together to build a future where diversity is valued, equality is given, and every voice matters. The path forward requires courage. It requires commitment, and it requires collective action. And I'm proud to walk this path with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Isabel. You set the stage really with a lot of, well, clarity and precision. I wouldn't have expected anything else. If we do nothing, polarization will continue to deepen. However, if we really recognize it for what it is, and you mentioned a lot of this, a crisis of trust, of participation, how we also relate to one another, then we really have something amazing that we can work with. And polarization doesn't happen in a vacuum. Again, you mentioned that it thrives where, for example, trust erodes, where there is no dialogue, where citizens feel unheard, and where narratives are weaponized rather than understood. And if we want to strengthen democracy, we really need to start where those division festers, and it is in our communities, our institutions, and really in our everyday encounters. And then education, culture, and civic participation are really not peripheral concerns. They are not luxuries to be considered once the political storms settle. They are the foundation for a society that resists polarization, that holds space for nuances, that refuses to be torn apart by fear and misinformation. And so, as we take this conversation forward, we really could not have a better panel to help us untangle these questions and begin shaping the solutions. And we have Tatiana Babrauskiene, with her deep experience in education and trade unions, who knows firsthand how disinformation, economic pressure, and systemic challenges are eroding trust in institutions. We then have Lars Ebert at the forefront of cultural advocacy. He understands that culture is not just about expression, but it is about identity, connection, and the ability to imagine shared futures, even in times of division. Then we have Wim Gabriels, leading on student mobility, who has seen how intercultural experiences can shape young people's perspectives, equipping them with the tools to navigate complexity and counteract polarization before it happens. And last but not least, Daniela Vancic, working on grassroots democracy, who will bring the vital perspective of local engagement, because trust in democracy does not begin in parliaments or in institutions. It begins where people feel heard, where they feel valued, and empowered to shape the world around them. So all four of you are really brilliantly placed to challenge us, to provoke and push us towards meaningful solutions. So let's begin. We will do a round of one question each, and then we'll open the panel to a more sort of chilled out and laid back exchange rather than keeping up the formality. So Tatiana, we'll start with you. Trust in institution is declining due to various factors: disinformation, geopolitical tensions, challenges within the teaching profession, and all of this fuels societal polarization. So how do you see these factors shaping divisions in our democracies, and particularly from the perspective of education and trade unions?
Thank you. I think Isabel already answered most of the questions, I think, of the panelists here in a long speech. But I will try. As you're a mathematician, I imagine I'm architect. And I just imagine. And then if I imagine how the European Union is built, how democracy is built, it's kind of a bridge. And this bridge has few crucial pillars, which is education you have mentioned. You mentioned culture, you mentioned media. There is also governments, of course. There is also civil society and trade unions there. And now what happens also, just, I like allegory, and when you imagine what happens with the bridge, with these pillars, if corrosion is happening, if cracks are going in form of disinformation, misinformation, fake news, deliberate, actually scientifically arranged, because don't be naive. Those who are spreading this is organized exactly the same, like it was organized during NASA's time, when Goebbels was in charge. It's exactly the same. What happens in the United States now with the Voice of America, with the free media, it's alarming, it's alarming. You know that tens of journalists were arrested just within one day in different parts of the world because now officially they are fired. It's announced that they are not anymore employed, so they lost the protection. So what we observe now, we have very shaky bridge. If you don't like allegory, I can give you percentage. 42% of EU population, according to Eurobarometer, trust European institutions. 42. It's too little. If we look how, I mean, because we speak about the trade unions, we speak about civil society. It's also an interesting statistics about the trade unions. So it's around, I just checked the number. So if you look, this is European Commission report, 48% of teachers in the European Union feel undervalued, feel not respected, feel not heard. And when you see strikes of teachers, it's not because they want salary. I'm trade unionist, I am a teacher, and I wrote so many support letters to different countries in the European Union, to many organizations. There are many demands. And one of the demands is actually for the status of the profession, to return this value of the profession. And with this, behind this, a lot of things, not just the salary. So how these things are correlating. They're correlating also with their disinformation and specific attack on education on teachers. This bad image is created deliberately. Teachers are stupid, they are not able to work with the technologies, that students are much more advanced. That's not true. That's not true. Children need teachers. Every child needs a teacher, because it's not only about giving knowledge and the skill, it's also giving the right attitude and giving the right mindset, also speaking about the values. Without these things, your knowledge, your skills are useless. If you don't have right attitude, if you don't have also values which are essential to support the skills. We have fantastic examples, of course, and we see immediately how it correlates also with the performance. We have Finland, where they started to put also these things like critical reading, analyzing the text from early education. 15-year-old performance in PISA shows great results. It's not just literacy. It's not just read and write. It's about analyze the text. It's about thinking critically and make conclusions out of this. And that's how you understand that something is wrong with this information. You are able to distinguish that this is disinformation, this is false, this is misinformation, this is completely fake news. So this is something what young people are missing. But on the positive side, I can say, and I said that I will also mention this, it's another thing which is recently started to be introduced in many schools, Nordic countries, like they started. It's about inclusion. And only just teaching the inclusion at school already decreases polarization in the society by 30%. The same happens if teachers, if the trade unions are active in social dialogue, if they feel valued, it's the same. We are immediately, the society, you see that the atmosphere becomes healthier. So let's see to these things, because they are very, very important. And as I promised, I will not usurp time because we want to engage also with people sitting here. I see a lot of faces. I know many of you, and I know that every one of you has something to add and to say in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Lars, culture has long been a bridge between communities, and it fosters dialogue and mutual understanding in times of crisis. To make a connection between what Tatiana was saying and your experience, what concrete ways can cultural institutions, but also artistic expression, in the very individual level perhaps, help rebuild trust and social cohesion in our societies?
Yeah, thank you for the questions, and thank you for the previous speakers, and also for the speakers of this morning, which still resonate very strongly with me. And I think I would like to almost start with Isabel, what you mentioned, that society thrives when everyone feels they belong, and I would like to add to that notion of belonging the notion of becoming, because I think that might be something where the cultural sector can contribute strongly, and which maybe is seen within these polarized situations in our society rather as a threat, that societies are changing quickly, there's so much insecurity, there are all these crises, the precariat was precarious situations that take agency from people were mentioned this morning, and then you look at, where do I belong? Which side of the political spectrum? What binds me? Am I, is there a religious belonging? Whatever kind of belonging. But I think what binds us all in this room, and that's something very obvious, is that we are building something together, and that we find common ground in a joint becoming. And I think that is where culture comes in. And I mean, there's a lot of evidence, like there's this European Commission study from 1.5 years ago, Culture and Democracy, the evidence. So there's obvious evidence what culture does for people's feeling of belonging. But if I look at that study, for instance, what we often talk about is giving more people access to culture. Now, interestingly, my organization has been running published a study in October last year, the State of Culture report, the State of Culture in Europe, a barometer of sorts that we want to publish every second year from now. And there are a lot of interesting findings, but one is very obvious, that the perception of the cultural sector by policymakers and the general public, and the self-image of the cultural sector are vastly different. Policymakers want to broaden access. The cultural sector itself sees their own power in transforming societies through participation, not through getting more people buying tickets or coming into our institutions, but engaging them in creative processes that are led by artists. And that's the role of artists that you mentioned. And it's not one against the other. Both are valid notions, but I think if we want to overcome polarization and get everyone in, we need to not only get everyone in to convince, that was a word that I heard a lot this morning, but to co-author our future together. Only if we are in a creative process together where we imagine future images that are not there yet, positive images of a future, then we empower citizens to have that democratic agency that they need to pull themselves out of a precarious situation and decide, not only like or dislike or vote against or for, but also be voted, have their own opinion. And just to maybe conclude with a very practical document that I cherish a lot, I want to mention the Porto Santo Charter, that was drawn up under the Portuguese presidency, and that I think doesn't get the attention that it needs to get. And I'm advocating for follow-up steps on that charter for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that it looks at 3 levels. It doesn't only give policy recommendations, but it gives recommendations for me as a citizen, how I can develop my agency, for cultural institutions, how they can become places where co-creation and cultural democracy happens, and for policymakers to enable it. And I think these three dimensions we need to think together. And I picked that up somehow this morning. The keynote speaker said you can make Europe dream big. You, civil society, can make Europe dream big again. But if we want to develop that dream and these images of the future, we need to set the conditions, the funding for the institutions. The institutions need to become more democratic. And I mean, it's a chicken and egg situation. By that, I, as a citizen, need to be empowered and learn how to take my agency. And I think if we talk about that, we might get a little step closer to a contribution of the cultural sector to bridging that gap that you sketched.
Thank you very much, Lars. Wim, as someone who, I was 16 years old and I had the luck or privilege to be moved from very white, homogeneous, single religion Poland to a school where I lived and ate and got educated with 67 whatever nationalities from all over the world. And it completely changed me. And I think this is also the reason why I work in civil society today. So we know that learning, mobility, intercultural exchanges can help young people develop those skills that are needed to engage, to have more agency, to have different perspectives. But from your work, from your own experiences, how can those skills gained, those experiences be actually nourished, nurtured, and strengthened to better prepare young people for life in those situations where, you leave the walls and suddenly you realize that the world is not as nice and cozy as it was for me in my lovely school.
Well, also thank you for the question, and thank you for your kind of framing how it was for you to do this type of exchange. I think many people actually participating in, for example, programs such as Erasmus Plus alter perhaps their course of their life based on these type of experiences, and I think it's a good illustration of the power that it can have. And we believe that the Erasmus program should really also have not only an impact on the individual that participates in it, but encourage the participants to reach out to the local community and to move beyond, let's say, the people it interacts with. Because learners don't only get learners don't really only learn in the classrooms that they participate in, but there's a lot of learning happening through participating in cultural activities, through engaging within local communities, and the sense of what makes a community tick is something that you don't really get in classrooms. For that, you need to go out and explore the world. And we do see that to this day, though, there are still challenges for students to engage with those local communities. So, and I think more and more we see challenges for students to participate in local communities during their exchanges. So after 35 years of the program, the majority of the students still indicate that the majority of their friends are other internationals experiencing also the same stories that they are experiencing. Participation in, for example, in organized youth or student activities are low. Close to 60% indicated they don't engage with any type of organized youth activities during their exchange. So they don't really connect with the local communities as much as they should. And I think this is for us one of the biggest working points that there is still to this day to the Erasmus program. And we have a project, Enriching Communities Through Engaged Mobilities, where we really try to build this up more by using more, by changing the way we teach and by changing the way we engage with teaching and learning during their exchange, by, for example, community engagement and service learning methodologies, where we are also coaching universities to actually reshape their curricula, and how can we make sure that they offer teaching methodologies that are community driven. What can we do to make sure that the education continues to contribute to society? So we're doing different activities to engage in 15 different university cities. And we're also doing them now connected to EU values. So how can we bring learning and related to European values such as human dignity, human rights, rights when students go abroad? How do they make sure that they can access their those rights still in different countries? And that we're going to test in different universities with a teaching methodology that we're developing that would then later on also connect to this type of different initiatives. And I think it is through this type of actions that we need to continue to have students reflect on their on what they've actually learned, because I think very often there's not enough investment. There's a lot of administrative processes happening, but there's not a lot of coaching of what is the learning that actually people are engaging with, and that connecting that to what I'm a big fan of the word agency, because I think it's very important that this empowers these young people to then actually take an active step and to become actors in their society. Because there has been a lot of, every year, there's 3 more million students that have taken part in Erasmus Plus, but where are they? Why are you not speaking up more? I think that is a critical question we should ask ourselves, because why are they not speaking up more in favor of Europe? Why are they not empowering and fighting disinformation? And that is something that I think at the core of this, that we're trying to ask ourselves now, and figuring out how we can give young people more space and more tools and more gumption to actually speak out when they feel something is not right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And that goes really logically now to ask the question to Daniela, because Pim was talking about the importance of connecting to the local level, local communities. Because we know that I also talked about it in my opening notes, the change happens at the grassroots level, not necessarily in parliaments, institutions. It gets governed there later, but it really starts and thrives at the very local civic engagement level. But very often these initiatives have a sort of limited impact, right? It has a big impact on the immediate communities, but what happens next? So from your experience from Democracy International, Daniela, how can these bottom-up democratic efforts create a much more longer-lasting influence at national and then at EU level?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question, Piotr. And I completely agree with you. I think democracy really comes alive. We see it at the local level. And there's a few reasons why they don't often scale up then and reach national level or even EU level. Some reasons for that is, of course, lack of funding, lack of visibility, or lack of institutional support. But since we can recognize those challenges, we can also then find solutions for those. So I think first to create lasting change, which of course, at the end of the day, is always their goal in one way or another. We have to really find those pathways to institutionalize those kind of participation processes that they often engage with at local levels. We know that citizens' assemblies or deliberative juries, as they're often called, are really popular at local level. And so we need to find ways of how to feed those local processes in that bring in randomly selected citizens, people of the community, not the people that are the usual suspects, as we always say, how to also feed those ideas in at the national and then also the EU level. And this sounds like, I think, like a huge project, and people say, how can you from the local level scale that up? But it's not exactly impossible. In fact, it's also not unprecedented, because we've done it before with the Conference on the Future of Europe. Which, as we know, there was national events, there was national citizens' assemblies, and those were also the accumulation of often local citizens' assemblies, which fed their way up to the EU level. And so we can really take that Conference on the Future of Europe structure, that plenary structure, which brought in so many unique actors. There was a whole section for civil society, for social partners, even members of national parliament. Not often that the EU institutions engage with them, and that we have a space for members of national parliament in those spaces, but also brought brought all this into a channel and scaled up the process of the Citizens' Assembly from local level, national, made their way to the EU. So I would say we should do much more of that. And we know that the European Citizens Panels have continued since the Conference on the Future of Europe. It is, I always say, we can argue all day about the impact of and how well implemented all the recommendations of the Conference on the Future of Europe were, but one thing is the most visible impact of that is the continuation of the European Citizens Panels. And so I would say, why not also help feed those panels with ideas from the local level? Now, of course, we know there's the Commission launched the Have Your Say platform, but I would say really on that specific topic right now, EU budget is the next one that's going to be discussed. Couldn't come at a better time, I think. Why not also take ideas from the local level, from citizens, to feed those European discussions? Because at the end of the day, those recruited citizens, those randomly selected citizens, are people who are in their local communities. They're not people who engage with the EU, with Europe, in their daily lives. So that's one way, is to institutionalize these pathways. Another way to create this lasting change is, at the end of the day, democracy needs money, and so I think the EU really needs to amp up its efforts, and also creating more funding for democracy development, especially seeing that some of the biggest international actors are stepping out, and even if this is right now in the courts, right, with US aid, National Endowment for Democracy. It still shows that the situation is precarious. That means we might not always be able to rely on those actors, and we should be able to also fund those programs and those initiatives. So we really need to amp this up at EU level, and that's why I think the discussions about the multi-annual financial framework couldn't come at a better time than right now. This European Citizens Panel on the topic of budget, which was announced months ago, way before the announcement of this US aid announcement, that couldn't come at a better time, and it couldn't have been a better topic. And so we need to make sure that we really get the democracy development, democracy protection, safeguarding, and democracy innovations really as part of this big funding pot that's expanding, and continuing, like the SURF programs, Erasmus Plus, and making sure, I completely agree with you, that they're not just one-off events and one-off projects, but they have a lasting impact. So at the end is, how do we invest in these projects and these participation methods that they have a lasting impact? I would also lastly just say that we need to create some entry points into politics for local activists, for people that were active in their local community. I always say that politicians are that mayors make the best politicians, and that we could really learn the most from mayors, because of course they see the real impact of policy on their communities, and so we need to create also those kind of development, training, capacity building to also help scale up their work and really help create those entry points into politics for those that are really working on the ground to see their communities do better.
Thank you very much, Daniela. So I think that there's a lot of common threads coming from your reflections. I think the key thing for me is the fact that it's about engaging in those conversations and defending, in the end of the day, democracy, which is so precious to us, and social inclusion and justice and equality in those spaces where people meet, where they learn, where they engage in culture, where they engage in exchanges, where they go to work. It's about the togetherness, because in every single element of what you mentioned in terms of the possible solutions, the element of togetherness is really important. I'd like to open the opportunity to get some comments from the floor, but perhaps before that, if any of you would like to take.
Yeah, just a fantastic idea. On my way here, I just arrived from Vilnius. It's my home city, and it's something popped out on LinkedIn, and I looked, and it was initiative, Lithuanian initiative, which is called Vilnius is a School, and it was intrigued. What is Vilnius is a School? You need to know that Vilnius is very multicultural, multinational city, historically. So we have Jewish community, we have also, of course, not so big as it used to be. We have a Polish minority, we have Belarusian, we have also now Ukrainians, we have Lithuanians. And after the pandemic, that what the realization came, and the reality is now that around 5-10% of education is happening still online. So teachers in Vilnius mobilize their resources, their kind of know-how, and providing this instead of putting, because polarization started to grow because of the war, because of many other things. Also, I don't need to mention you're listening that for the whole day, what is the reason of this. And the idea to have Vilnius as a school is just brilliant, out of the box idea. Why not to make it, instead of trying to fix, I do agree, but local sometimes means also a local kind of localized, like of the whole city. Why not? Or it could be even few regions in Europe. It could be considered as local initiative. It's not necessarily a very small segment. It can be much bigger segment. And so I'm now going to find out what is there behind this, because it was just a note of this, and that they are happy that they created this, and they have huge expectations. But they say that this is something what probably we need to do, some initiatives like this.
Yeah. Lars or Wim or Daniela or Isabel, indeed, with anything?
Yeah, but I'm
Go on.
humbly waiting for the audience. But
And then we'll
no, because I wanted to open up another chapter actually that we maybe indirectly touched upon in this panel, but that was elaborated this morning or in the previous session about rearming Europe and the whether we should go along the defense rhetoric or maybe even war rhetoric that we have, or whether we should stick to our narrative of values. And I think it's not. I personally think one doesn't exclude the other, and we can be very cautious about how we literally defend to the outside world and defend values on the inside. But I think if you look at the College of Commissioners now also being a defense college, like a sort of security council for Europe of sorts, where you have all the resorts sitting together talking defense. And if you look at examples, of course, Ukraine is the obvious example, but you could also look to Finland and what role the Finnish defense strategy gives to culture, where cultural institutions are seen as the basic infrastructure that needs to be maintained in case of a war, because of many, many reasons, because of course they contribute to community well-being, psychological well-being. They are first response centers to get people together. If we think in these terms, like not how we want to defend Europe, the borders of Europe, but we, civil society, how do we defend the social cohesion? And we know how we do that every day, but it gets magnified automatically if we think it under the paradigm of defense. And I think this is, it's stupid to think in terms of opportunistic momentum, but I think we cannot other than respond to 800 billion being mobilized at the moment without saying, and at least, I'm throwing something in, at least 2%, well-known figure, at least 2% are for civil society, to strengthen our role on the inside of Europe, to hold us together. And then we can unfold everything we've been talking about on this panel now. I can say to my members, okay, we need to be geared up to become more participatory, because we have to hold people together. Education can do that. I don't know, democracy initiatives can do that, and so further and so forth. So I just want to make the plea to not shy away from this discussion, but step into it with our narrative and what we have to offer within societies.
Thank you very much. Lars, okay, we have time to take some comments or questions from anyone who is willing and has, I hope, energy. We haven't been too harsh on you. Yes, I'll take. Maybe just say who you are, and if you have a question specifically for anyone or just a comment, that's fine too.
Thank you so much, Piotr. I'm Furkan Sorkunjuk. I work at Volunteer Europe, and I have specific comment on the distrust part, because like just a month ago, we were working on these operating grant applications, and I had a big question in my mind, like what to write about our operating grant at Volunteer Europe, for instance. So the main question in my mind was about the democracy. So I thought at the beginning that it was the democracy itself which was in crisis. So all this like polarization, extreme parties, and so on. But that is kind of like, in my mind, kind of like a wrong assumption, because democracy works because people vote for something and they see that their representatives are in power. So in that case, I just moved on this question and I said, okay, it's not democracy. It might be the distrust part. So I just want to come back to Tatiana's point about the distrust, that it is the highest point in the European Union. So it is around 50%, and that is the highest trust we see between the citizens and the EU institutions. I mean, highest, but that means probably there are some people who don't trust the EU when you walk on the street and so on. And just like 2 days ago, I was talking to some of my friends in Germany, and I said, I'm going to Brussels in 3 days. It's just going to be like an amazing experience. I need to get my passport because I need it, because I'm a non-EU official. And he said, well, why do you need it? Because it is still in Germany. And I'm like, okay, so we need to start from education. We need to tell that, okay, it's not part of the Belgium and stuff. So what I want to come back to now is about the distrust part, because, okay, there is like a lack of trust between the institutions and the citizens, but there is also like a trust between the civil society organizations and the citizens. So that's around 70 or 80%. That is important. But what we need to highlight probably is that we all know the attacks on the NGOs and civil society organizations, which has started with the environmental NGOs in this Brussels bubble at the European Parliament. So they spent, according to some misled and false information, that billions of euros are spent for advocacy and stuff, and when people see that, okay, there is like a problem because we don't want them. So what is targeted at the moment is that, okay, if some people break this trust between the civil society organization, activists, whether formal or like informal networks, so we basically lose the ability to reach out to citizens and get their opinions on board and start working on that. So my question is that, okay, there is like a huge narrative in the Brussels bubble now here, because, okay, we have lots of probable organizations active in the EU bubble and so on. So we need to act, but what is the right strategy at the moment that, okay, we have one word coming out of all these institutions, civil society organizations, and citizens, that we keep this trust between the civil society organizations and the people, which also probably lead at some point more trust between the EU institutions and citizens, which should lead kind of more democratic environment in Europe. Okay, that was a bit fast and also like long, but thank you so much for your time.
Just jumping first, because that was my... You know, I have an answer. I have actually two answers. First is that we need to go dig deeper, because behind this mistrust is simply that people don't have any information. We speak about disinformation, misinformation, fake news, and where we communicate Europe. I used to go to schools in Lithuania, and then you know how teacher says, we have our guest from Europe. I'm coming from the moon. I say, you are Europe. Or it's a question from my family. So what you are doing there in Europe now? And it's like, it's not really mistrust. They don't have any information, no clue, and my mom doesn't. So can you explain me one day what you are doing there? That is her question every time. She's 95, and she has very good memory, don't worry. She still remembers the Second World War, but she never is able to understand what we are doing here. And then if someone asks her or someone else in that school, a young person who already is able to fill the form and say yes or no, say, I don't know. So how I can say I trust if I don't know? So that is one thing. And yeah, we need to communicate. We need to communicate, and we need, if you are doing that project, just dig deeper what is behind this, because I personally don't believe this. I see now what's happening in Bucharest, Budapest, Belgrade, young people there, streets. In Belgrade yesterday, 1.6 million people. I saw parents wrote the names and phone numbers of the parents, and also the blood group of the blood in case something happens. So incredible what's happening now. And we believe that these countries are brainwashed, they don't trust, and they all have European flags. They have European symbolic. They want to be attached to European values. So we need to investigate really what's happening behind this. And we need to communicate Europe, really need to communicate. Where is the information source about European Union? We don't have. Politico, that's not even European, it's American. And then the rest. So, and now especially that the Voice of America will be soon closed, maybe the Voice of Europe should appear. Very strong everywhere in the world, because we are strong. We're the strongest economy. Depends.
Thank you, Tatiana. Any of you would like to come back? Yeah, Daniela.
Not to take up too much time, because I think that there was another hand. Just to add to that, I completely agree, and I think we see the consequence right now. I grew up in the US, and we really see what decades of cutting civic education looks like in the US, because you see an increase of the population that are quite literally saying, we prefer to have a strong man, prefer to have a one person who's making decisions, who doesn't go through bureaucracy, who is just cutting, slashing. And that is a growing percent of the population who is basically saying we choose autocracy over democracy in the United States. And that is the direct result of decades of slashing funding to civic education. So if we're talking in Europe about how we need to tackle this trust problem, how we need to also increase European identity, and then we need to increase the budget for civic education. We don't need to talk about slashing the budget here. We need to increase it like exponentially.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Okay, there's a question from Pete over there, then a gentleman here, then Arya, and then we'll come back to you and finish on that.
Hello, as you heard, my name is Pete. So I represent the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions. I think it's very important to mention civil education and how important it is when we talk about skills and competences to really understand when it comes to a polarized world, debating and engaging in actual dialogue and understanding the literacy, media literacy, but also the values of democracy do not appear in our societies. It's values we build and develop and understand. My question would be, especially when it comes to the citizens panels, how risky it is to open the panels for a political process that many times the non-usual suspects, which I would fully disagree with this statement, because it goes against the work we do. We are civil society to make sure that the ones that have no voice are heard, to make sure that the ones that are not visible are seen. And by saying not usual suspects, at least for the work we do in Obesu with the secondary education students, we're questioning the value and work we do from schools. And the second point would be, how do you engage citizens if you don't ensure that they're properly informed, that they have access to equal access, to information, and that is a panel of equals presenting their diverse views, and not of a weaker person because of their background, or a person that lacks the information because they don't have the information, education, and background that you need to engage as equal in a citizens panel. Where do you see the risks in this proper, informed, and equal representation? Thank you.
We have guests from Europe. Wonderful. I come back to you. I'm here to learn more about experiences, concrete. Thank you very much for your analysis. Coming back to me, I'm coming from the University of Paris-Nanterre, and I remember 2004, Eastern Enlargement. I was directing German-French law studies, And I was a friend of Socrates, Erasmus, thank you, dear colleague. Very good base. And we decided, what can we do for these countries? I didn't know. So we decided to create summer schools, German, French summer schools, with countries and in countries of a former communist area. This will be in Soviet and Yugoslavia. So in the next 20 years, we went to the Baltic states and we went to the Western Balkans, mostly other countries, Maghreb, Turkey, and so on. What did we do? Guests from Europe, please tell us. Of course, you were a member, Lithuania were a member of the European Union, and so, of course, we talked about the new laws, integration, ideas, philosophy, and law, and the enlargement of espace européen, of a room, a European room for European law. So that's working for 20 years. From 2004 to 2024. So, of course, our friends say no more in our school. We have guests from Europe. They are part of Europe, and I think they are doing well. So, I think that's very important, this implication of our friends from the new European countries. And we did it in another way with Poland, with other Baltic states, and this is a way, I think, to open our university system to civil society. We saw this since the beginning. So Vilnius was opening his program to the civil society. Very interesting if we are discussing the beginning, 2004, because I was a little bit shocked because I saw that very often our teachers, they are not à l'aise, comme on dit en français. They felt a little bit blocked when talking, talking with a paper, and not a free discussion. But they changed in the last 40 years. So I think that's a very good way to see together with our friends from the new member states with questions. Of course, but I will no longer insist, we know civil society is changing. In the beginning, it was very pro-European, and now we know, we went to Bulgaria, other countries, there is another system of value. I think social society is reflecting the values of a time, and that's why I say they are changing. Why they are changing? And so I think it's very important to study the question in each country. So social society in each country is not the same if we compare today. To finish, in Nanterre we try to compare different countries and to see how do they define today civil society, and of course in the frame of a question of European values that are changing too.
Thank you very much. Arya, if you can have a very quick
Yes, I'm
comment or
going to
question.
try to be brief. Thank you very much. So my name is Arya Krauchenberg and I represent the European Parents Association. And of course, you all know that families are the nucleus. They are the core entity in every society. Yeah? And families today are not only fighting the economic inequalities that exist, that were discussed very intensely this morning, but also what was mentioned on the panel, and thank you very much for all your contributions, this looking for leadership. And unfortunately, leadership at the moment is very much offered by the wrong people. They have a narrative that people fall for. So I think we need to come up with a counter-narrative and a counter-leadership position in order to get people back into the idea of Europe and the democratic values. I know that people go back and they say, well, already Aristotle said democracy is the worst of all forms of government, but we don't know any better. So let's make this work. And I think civil society and civil society organizations are a great place to practice and to show how cooperation can work and how we can make this work together. Thank you.
Thanks, Arya. And I'm sorry that I cannot take any more comments or questions now because we're actually getting a bit pressed for time. So I'm not also going to come back to you. I'm sorry for that. However, we will break out very shortly. If you have something that you would like to share, please share it within the group because we will have facilitators who will take that on board as well. And then it'll be shared during the conclusions. Because what we have heard today from all of you is that there are a lot of solutions that exist in classrooms, in cultural spaces, in student mobility, in grassroots activism. But all these solutions require action, and I think this conversation really would not be complete without hearing from those who are at the heart of shaping our future. And this is where we go to talk about trust, belonging, and the resilience of democracy. And we need to take into consideration the perspectives of those who will carry those responsibilities forward and into the future. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Adam Mokhtari, a student representing Your Europe USA, and also Kathy Jones, a head teacher. Both of you bring with you an experience of both teaching, Kathy, and learning, Adam, in times of change, navigating the evolving role of education, civic participation, and understanding what it means to be engaged citizens in today's Europe. So, Adam, we'll start with you.
Diagwich. Hi, my name is Adam Mokhtari, representing Yeas. I am from Ireland, so I want to wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day, or as we say in Ireland, Leila Fá Pádraig. Last week, I took part in EESC's annual youth event, Your Europe, USA. Last week, alongside approximately 90 young people from across the EU, candidate countries, and the UK. Attending Ye's 2025 and Civil Society Week has shown me how important it is for young people to have a voice in democracy, human rights, and political participation. The 5 Ye's recommendations were fighting corruption through transparency and young participation, active citizenship from classroom to community, in for equality, youth deserves a seat, develop a coherent climate change strategy. One of my biggest takeaways in the role of education in shaping an informed and engaged youth. Education helps us navigate the world, showing us how to spot misinformation, check facts, and think critically. It also teaches us how to get involved. Without my school, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to attend Ye's and speak here today in front of you all. I never imagined I'd be a part of an event like this. Now I'm inspired to get involved in politics at a local level and encourage my friends to do the same. Holding events for young people from all backgrounds will get more of us engaged and informed, and those conversations will continue in schools and communities. In schools, subjects like ethical education, civic education, and extracurriculum activities can help. It's important to ensure all young people are included in the conversation and education. Both formal and informal, in-person and online, plays a key role in making that happen. Social media can also be a powerful tool to help inform young people and get them interested in democracy. At Ye's, EESC President Oliver Ropke welcomed our ideas, and they'll be presented here at Civil Society Week with the potential for real impact. The EU Youth Coordinator encouraged us to keep pushing for change, invite local politics to discuss these issues, and take action in our own countries. Education helps us understand European values, democracy, and human rights, but more importantly, it gives us opportunities to practice them. I attend an Educate Together school where democracy, equality, and child-centered learning are part of how we learn every day. These values will help shape how I see the world and motivate me to take action. The values also reflect EU values. Yays has shown me that people can make a difference and we have a voice. We may not have all our recommendations met, but I know now that they are at least on the discussion table. I'll be taking this experience back home, getting involved, and encouraging others to do the same. This experience gives me hope as an Irish young person with Algerian heritage. I feel that my voice has been heard. Education can give other young people like me the same experience. It will help reduce division, disillusionment, and feelings of discrimination. Gura Mahagut, thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Adam. Kathy.
So I'm going to stay sitting if that's all right here. So thank you very much for providing me with the chance to share my thoughts as the principal of Bring More Educate Together Secondary School. And I'm also representing Yays here today. I'm a principal of a diverse school of 830 students in Balbriggan, Ireland. It's a very fast growing community on the outskirts of Dublin. And with fast growing communities, it's hard to develop that sense of community and belonging. And a sense of that you have a purpose there. I firmly believe in the power of education and inclusivity and active citizenship. And our involvement as a school in European initiatives like Yays has given our students invaluable opportunities to engage with other issues such as democracy, human rights and social justice. And these are what matter to our young people. I was delighted to hear Tatiana speak about the importance of society valuing schools and teachers and education, as our work is really important and we are very committed to working with young people, especially in a town such as ours that is fast growing and has a lot of young people and maybe some disillusioned as well. In our school, we're deeply committed to child-centred education, and through European programmes such as Yays, Erasmus+, EU Youth Dialogues and the EU Child Participation Platform, our students have had the opportunity to gain the tools to engage with critical issues like local politics, climate change, inclusion and digital literacy. These programmes, they don't only teach them about European values, but they also give a chance for the students to truly contribute to shaping Europe's future. Our students have worked with the European Commission to produce child-friendly documents, and from this they decided while in a taxi on the way home from one of their working groups, why don't we have child-friendly documents in the school? And they said, can we implement this in our school, making our policies child-friendly? So we were able to bring what we learned from working with EU institutions to a local level to our school. Participating in Yays was incredibly beneficial for both educators and students. As educators, we were provided with the resources and tools to teach democracy and European values. We were pointed in the direction of all that is on offer to us. Sometimes this can be difficult to find. This ensures that all of our young people will be able to understand their rights and be able to be involved in democratic processes. We got to meet with fellow European educators, and that was a really great experience, because you think when you come from a country that everybody thinks the same as you, but when you meet all of the countries together, you can find similarities but also difference, and in that there's learning. For students like Adam, who I'm extremely proud of, Yays, I think, was a transformative experience for him. He saw firsthand how he could education can empower young people and take action to speak out. He also had the opportunity to meet with young people from all over Europe. He made a very good friend from one of the English delegates, and I believe that this experience many students would feel is impossible, but when the door is opened, it shows them that it is possible, and we need to show the other young people that these experiences are possible. I look forward to seeing what he decides to do with this experience when he returns home to our school and community. The young people involved in Yays last week made some key recommendations that truly reflect pressing issues of today, and these recommendations are being discussed here today, and I think this is truly democracy in action. In our school, we actively promote democracy and inclusion through initiatives like our student voice team, our student council, debates with other schools, and we also highlight global citizenship moments throughout every subject that we have. We have a student voice notice board, and this ensures that European values are not just discussed during events like YAYS, but they're also embedded in daily learning and the fabric of the school culture. It's important that when we as educators and schools and youth organisations send students to events like YAYS, that the students truly reflect the diversity of our communities. We must include students from all backgrounds, abilities and experiences. It's essential to bring not only those who are academic or truly engaged, but also we must include and bring students who feel disengaged and marginalised and show them that their voice truly matters. True democracy means ensuring that every young person feels heard and represented. This will mean that education can be a powerful tool to combat division. And from my experience, I have seen the power of inclusion and the power of young people having a voice promotes a sense of belonging in our community. And to quote Isabella's, society change when everybody feels they belong to it. That's really, really great. And it's great to hear that the EESC values inclusion and it is a priority. I also like that you said we need to communicate. Like, what does being in the EU actually mean for our young people? Like, I love the way what Tatiana said, you know, kind of when you turn up as the guest speaker in the school, it's like, oh, here's the European visitor, you know. So in May, we are bringing some delegates from Europe to our school, and we will not introduce them that way. We will say, you know, these are our partners, you know, we work together. And we have shared values. Through involvement in activities like YAYS, our students have learned to navigate the online world, to challenge misinformation and develop critical thinking. These are skills that are essential for our youth today. They will gain confidence in engaging democratic political discussions, and they will know that their voices matter. I know the young people in my school have a lot to say on issues such as housing, poverty, health, education, freedom of travel, democracy and the online world, and the facilities that are in our local area for young people. As we move forward, it is important that young people understand that this is their Europe and they do have a say. They are not only shaping the future, they are also creating Europe that reflects their values and aspirations. We have a responsibility to ensure that these values are not eroded. Our school is extremely proud to be part of this journey, and we are very proud to be involved in YAYS, and particularly today to bring the message from YAYS to Civil Society Week. And I look forward to seeing even more students from Europe contribute to democratic discussions and become leaders of change. To strengthen cohesion and participation in polarised society, we must let our young people know that this is their Europe and they do have a say. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you very much, Adam, and happy St. Patrick's Day to you. And also thank you for being here rather than at Kitty O'Shea's, which is probably already heaving by now. Right. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to Isabel, Tatiana, Lars, Wim, and Daniela. We will still break out for a very shortish but intensive breakout session where you will be in the capable hands of Petra, Arya, Sotiria, and Alfred. Correct. And we have got 4 different areas of flip charts. So to make it very quick, I think they will basically direct you to the most appropriate flip chart. But thank you so much for everything. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for everything. And then we will regroup in a moment.
Okay, dear partners, thank you very much. If you have a conclusion already, that's great. If not, we'll find one. Okay, very good. Let's wrap up. Thank you very much for your participation so far. So we will go to each group. I have a microphone here to hear what is their conclusions after the discussions they had. All right, I propose we start with this group. Are you done? You're trying to be done. Okay, so I'm going to move on the other side of the room, and we'll have one sentence conclusion from this workshop.
All right, so let me come a little bit further so that you can all see me. Well, thank you first of all very much to all the participants. As you can see, we came up with lots of ideas that will then be taken back to the plenary and the conclusions on Thursday. But what we would like to leave you with today as a sentence is the EU starts local. So think global, but act locally. That will be our sentence.
So difficult to sum it up because we have found several areas of intervention. In one sentence, it would be, we need to question things, we need to question the vocabulary we are using, we need to question maybe also the level where competences are distributed. We need especially to empower the young people. We need to inform them first and empower them, and especially we need to preserve our free space for discussion by using the blunt language and talk about things as they are and not just embellishing things. Thank you.
I can go next. So I think our group also had a very fruitful discussion, and we had a lot of good contributions from our participants. But I will try to sum up in a few words or sentence what we came up with. But it seems like from us, what's most important is education as a key to build capacity, to build a sense of community, and also making it more accessible for everyone, not just in space-wise, but also time-wise, because everyone needs to have some sort of contribution to make this cohesion a good process. And also the most important thing is creating resources so that we have the capacity to implement all of these ideas that we have to make a better and more cohesive society. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We took a bit more time because we're trying to summarize everything, but since you briefly explained your ideas, I'm going to do the same. It's a bit complicated to summarize everything under one sentence. So we talked about students' participation. How can we give young people opportunities? How can we support them? What about teachers and management? How can we support teachers, but also at this level? Since countries are following different guidelines, they are under different laws. It's important to highlight inclusivity and diversity. How can we bring learners and individuals in specific spaces that there is not much representation? Consultations with organizations, students' mobility. An important aspect is digital education and media literacy training. It should be a priority also across, according to the theoretical framework of funding. And polarized dialogue. Since we need to invest in dialogue, we need to promote dialogue with people with diverse perspectives and experiences. So voila, that's it. Thank you so much for the help, everyone.
So, thank you very much to all of you for your contribution. These recommendations will be sent to the conclusive session of the Civil Society Week, where they will be discussed with the panelists there. And one thing remains to be done is to thank everybody. Thank, first of all, the ESC for hosting the Civil Society Week. Thank you to Secretary General of the ESC for being with us, Isabelle Le Gallo-Flores. Thank you for the ESC member, Tania Babros-Kirine. Thank you to Karen as well. I don't know if she's still there. The team at the ESC organizing everything, without whom we could not organize all of this. Thank you to our moderator today, Piotr, Vice President of the Lifelong Learning Platform. Thank you very much. Thank you to our speakers, Lars, Wim, Daniela, from respectively Culture Action Network, the Erasmus Student Network, and Democracy International. I would like to thank also Adam and Kathy, I don't know if they're still there, from the Your Europe, Your Say. And special thanks as well to Andrea La Peña, which coordinated the work of this session today, and who unfortunately is not with us today because he's sick. So, so yeah, special thanks to him. He did most of the work. And just to remind you, finally, the other organizations that co-organized this panel, the European Association of Institute for Vocational Training, the European Parents Association, European Student Union, and ALDA, the European Association for Local Democracy. And of course, thank you to all of you for your listening and active participation. Thank you so much. And well, enjoy the Civil Society Week.